Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take your sources and, well, we get right to the heart of what you need to know.
Exactly. No fluff, just the core insights.
And today, we're looking at a really interesting source. It's a video transcript from Sheikh Nurjan Mirammadi.
Right, from the Mohammedan Way Sufi Realities YouTube channel.
The title alone grabs you. They enter through electronics and feed on your smell.
It certainly does. Intriguing, to say the least.
So our goal here is to unpack Sheikh Nurjan Mirammadi's perspective on these, let's call them unseen influences, and how he suggests navigating them day to day. It should really resonate if you're looking for those aha moments.
Absolutely. It's about understanding a specific spiritual framework for reality. So Sheikh Nurjan Mirammadi kicks things off by grounding the discussion spiritually.
How so?
He starts with Uzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim,
which means,
I seek refuge in Allah Almighty from Satan the rejected. In the name of Allah Almighty, the most compassionate, the most merciful, standard, but sets the stage.
Okay. Seeking protection right from the start.
And then he references the Quran, obeying Allah Almighty, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, and those in authority. Ulul Amis.
So it's establishing that chain of guidance, that authority structure. Mm-hmm. And I gather he speaks with a sense of humility.
Very much so. He often uses terms that really emphasize his reliance on divine grace, on Allah Almighty's support. Nothing comes from him, essentially.
That's a key element in many Sufi teachings, isn't it?
It is, and he connects this personal stance to a wider cosmic view. He mentions the anticipation around the holy month of Rajab.
Okay.
And this beautiful concept, Allah Almighty as a hidden treasure wanting to be known, he quotes, Subhanaman huwa khaliq an-nur.
Glory be to him who is the creator of light.
Precisely. So seeking knowledge becomes part of knowing the divine. He then talks about the heavenly realm, the Malakut.
Malakut, the unseen world of angels and spirits.
Kind of, yes. He describes this flow of knowledge coming down from there, but contrasts it with the darkness and oppression that's simultaneously happening here on Earth.
And that's where his work comes in, using media.
Exactly. He sees disseminating this knowledge through videos, online broadcasts, whatever, as actively fighting against that darkness, using modern tools for a spiritual purpose.
Interesting. So this leads him to talk about Satan's attacks.
Yes, he mentions Satan attacking from 6 directions, but then he pivots to address something else, people who constantly demand Dale.
Dale. Proof, like scriptural or logical proof.
Right. He suggests that this constant demand can sometimes indicate a kind of, well, a closed-mindedness. Maybe a lack of inner readiness for what Allah Almighty is offering.
That's a strong statement. So he's saying some knowledge isn't just about intellectual proof.
That seems to be the implication. He appears to value experiential understanding, things you grasp through meditation, contemplation, maybe more highly than just seeking quick answers. He suggests this kind of knowledge isn't necessarily for everyone, or maybe not everyone is open to it.
So for you listening, that raises a big question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How do you personally balance that need for proof with intuition or spiritual experience?
It's a fundamental point. And this focus on inner experience flows right into his ideas about how these unseen realities interact with our world.
This is where the electronics come in.
It starts getting there. He introduces the idea of unseen beings, creatures, entering our realm through energy fields, and yes, potentially linked to electronic devices.
Okay, hold on. Creatures entering through energy fields.
But that's the concept he puts forward.
Good.
And he frames the Islamic inheritance, the knowledge passed down, as a powerful defense against being sort of enslaved by fear or ignorance about these things.
And contrast that with, who was it? The Illuminati.
Yes, he mentions them, suggesting they, or similar forces, want to keep people ignorant to maintain control, a common theme in some circles.
But Sheikh Nurjan Mirammadi's view is that knowledge from Allah Almighty is meant to be free, liberating.
Absolutely. Directly opposing any agenda of control through ignorance. He then talks more specifically about the Jinn realm.
Jinn, the beings made of smokeless fire, mentioned in the Quran.
Correct. He says this realm is largely unknown to most people, but may be understood by those with spiritual authority. And interestingly, he suggests they don't need complex portals like in sci-fi. Their realm is such that they can easily step into ours.
So it's more about overlapping realities than physical doors.
That seems to be the idea. And it all ties back to energy. Our spiritual health, our physical health, it's all connected to our energy, according to him. He uses an analogy.
Which one?
Like a car with a bad engine. You can look fine on the outside, but if the inner workings, the energy system isn't right, you won't function properly.
Makes sense. So these creatures, they exploit our lack of inner knowledge.
That's what he suggests. They can attach themselves, causing disease difficulties, because we're not aware of our own spiritual energy or how to protect it.
And he links this to bigger events, earthly conflicts.
Yes, he frames earthly battles as having this unseen dimension influenced by these beings, and he connects it to the coming of the Dajjal.
The Antichrist figure in Islamic eschatology, the great deceiver.
Right. The man of deceit and his minions, as he puts it. He recalls the warnings from Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, about the Dajjal appearing pleasant, persuasive even, but leading people towards destruction.
So the unseen danger can be very deceptive. Which brings us back to those portals. How does he explain electronics acting as portals?
Okay, so he asserts that everyday things, TVs, radios, can function as pathways.
Pathways for what, exactly?
For these unseen beings. He says they move through electricity, describing it as a kind of smokeless energy.
Smokeless energy. That echoes the description of the Jinn's origin.
It does. And he says the sounds and visuals coming from these devices actually affect these entry points, these portals.
Is portals his exact term, or is that an interpretation?
He clarifies that he uses the term portals to make it relatable to a modern audience. But the core idea is any energy movement in the home can facilitate their entry.
And these beings bring negative energy.
Yes, he explicitly links them with negative energy.
He also talks about their sheer numbers, doesn't he?
Oh, massively. He puts forward the idea that they are 10 times more numerous than beings in our physical world. 10 times. And that they mirror all forms of creation. So think of any creature here, roaches, snakes, spiders. He suggests there are unseen counterparts, and they're just buzz around constantly throughout our homes.
It's a bit unsettling.
He contrasts it with the past, saying maybe people were more aware of actual bugs getting into the house. Now, our homes might seem cleaner, but this unseen realm is still teeming, in his view.
And the Gog and Magog reference.
Yeah, he mentions Maulana Sheikh's interpretation, linking Gog and Magog to vast nations of Jinn, emphasizing the immense scale of this unseen population. It really drives home the idea of their abundance.
So if they're so numerous and present, what attracts them? What sustains them?
Energy. Simple as that, according to Sheikh Nurjan Mirmadi. They thrive on energy, and crucially, he says they don't want humans to understand or even talk about energy.
Why not?
Because understanding it gives us power over it, potentially disrupting them. He contrasts this secrecy with the teachings of the Awliya.
The saints, the friends of Allah Almighty.
Right. He says they, drawing from the Malakut, the heavenly realm, do emphasize energy. So how do these beings sustain themselves? He describes it vividly as taking of energy like a breath. They literally inhale the energy, the life force, from things around them, like food.
Ah, so that's the connection to covering food and drink.
Exactly. It's presented as a practical way to limit their access to sustenance. He even references a hadith about the akaka, the birth sacrifice.
Tell about it.
It's the practice of burying the bones afterwards. Sheikh Nurjan Mirmadi explains this is so the jinn can take sustenance from the marrow, which he identifies as a potent energy source.
So covering food isn't just about hygiene in this view.
It has a deeper energetic purpose. He even links uncovered food-spoiling mold, bacteria, to these creatures consuming its life force, seeing the bacteria almost as their waste product.
That's quite an interpretation of microbiology.
He does mention microscopes, how they reveal unseen worlds, suggesting it's a parallel technology showing us layers beyond normal sight.
Okay, so they draw energy from food. What else?
Us. Humans are seen as a major energy source. He says they can literally breathe our life force.
And that can make us feel unwell.
Yes, contributing to illness, fatigue, unease. He connects this to the prophetic teaching, Shaitan runs through your blood.
I've heard that hadith.
And he links it to the advice to fast, suggesting fasting might combat sickness partly by reducing the energy available for these negative influences.
What about food cravings? Like sugar?
He suggests those can be influenced too, because these beings thrive in the bacterial environment that, high sugar intake promotes.
Interesting. He also mentioned covering the head.
Yes, specifically as protecting an important energy point at the top of the head, preventing them from drawing energy from there. He even suggests a link between not covering the head and, faster aging.
Really? That's specific.
He contrasts it with what he calls the natural light and illumination of pious individuals. He gives these everyday practices a very profound, energetic dimension.
So if they feed by breathing energy, how can we counter that?
He mentions specific fragrances, Uda agarwood and Esfin wild rue seeds. Burning these, he says, creates an atmosphere they find difficult to breathe in. It disrupts their sustenance mechanism.
Like an energetic repellent. What else?
Creating positive energy in the home through zikr remembrance of Allah Almighty.
Chanting or reciting divine names.
Yes, and reciting Dalailul Farat, praises on Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him. Also, listening to broadcasts from Rijalullah, the men of God.
How does that help?
He believes these practices attract positive spiritual forces, angels, other ranks of holy beings who actively combat the negativity these other creatures bring. It cleanses the environment.
So it's like spiritual housekeeping through sound and intention.
You could put it that way. And this all ties into the broader concept of the Sunnah.
The traditions and practices of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him.
Sheikh Nurjan Miramati frames the majestic Sunnah as immense protection. He gives specific examples.
Like what?
Wearing a ring, he links this to Prophet Suleiman, peace be upon him, who had command over Jinn. For men, covering the head, as we mentioned, and having a beard.
Why the beard?
He explains it energetically, protecting the throat energy point, aiding righteous speech. It's not just about appearance, it has an unseen function.
What about the feet? You mentioned rating from the feet earlier.
Right, he talks about an unseen rating from the feet, and the use of an asa, a cane or staff.
A cane. For grounding.
Exactly. Especially in open areas like deserts or even large fields. He suggests that it helps ground your energy, preventing clashes with other unseen energies that could cause physical issues like leg pain or back problems.
Fascinating. It gives these traditional items a whole new layer of meaning. What about prayer, Salah?
He describes prayer not just as ritual, but as sacred movement, a practice that actively opens up positive energy.
As opposed to
what he calls demonic movement. He explains that spiritual beings, angels, are present right from the azan, the call to prayer.
And the postures themselves. Standing, bowing, prostrating.
Each posture, he says, connects you to specific spiritual realities, specific angelic presences linked to the letters of the Arabic alphabet. It's incredibly layered.
He highlights prostration, sujud, right?
As the essence, yes.
Yeah.
He links it to the letter meme, representing the connection baina ahad wa amad, between the one creator and Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, the ultimate station of servitude and closeness.
And the sitting posture, atahiyah.
He connects that to receiving guidance. So prayer isn't just something you do, it's an active engagement with divine realities, a powerful way to enter the divine presence, regardless of how you feel at that moment.
That's powerful. What about gathering together for these practices, like zikr circles?
He describes circles of zikr as literal circles of paradise, attended by angels bringing blessings. And importantly, he says even watching or listening online can bring you into that reality.
So distance isn't necessarily a barrier in this energetic view.
Apparently not. He also says angels come to recognize homes where zikr is regularly practiced, and they stay there. The ability even to mention Allah Almighty's name is presented as a huge blessing in itself.
But he also warns about negative influences from movement.
Yes, inappropriate movements, listening to harmful things, these can create negative energy vortexes, attracting the wrong kind of influences.
And he mentions something specific about women.
He does. He speaks of women possessing a greater spiritual power related to Sur-e-Khalq, the secret of creation, linking it to energy points in the womb and heart.
Okay.
Because of this heightened sensitivity or power, he suggests their inappropriate movements can be particularly potent in attracting negativity. Again, this is his specific interpretation being presented.
And the contrast is?
Moving for Allah Almighty. Practices like sama whirling or hadra rhythmic invocation. He says these attract holy souls and elevate the entire gathering. Intention is key.
So understanding all this brings responsibility.
Absolutely. Sheikh Nurjan Miramati stresses that knowing this means you're accountable. For covering your food, covering yourself appropriately, managing your energy.
What about wudu? Ablution.
He explains the water of wudu actually burns these beings. It's a purification that goes beyond just preparing for prayer. It makes all of life potentially ibadah, worship, by keeping you in a state of purity. He adds that clean soil has a similar burning effect.
So these are tools given to combat their influence.
Exactly. He says Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, brought teachings specifically to fight their kingdom, supported by the Mu'min, the believers.
And these beings react to the spiritual state of a home.
He even shares anecdotes, seemingly from the Awliya, that these unseen beings will leave homes where there's no prayer, no positive energy, sometimes even complaining about the lack of spiritual light there.
That's a reversal of how you'd normally think about it.
It is. And finally, he emphasizes akada, proper manners even towards the unseen, acknowledging their presence when entering your home, reciting Surah Ikhlas, offering salams, greetings of peace. He says this simple act brings protection and blessings. It's about coexisting respectfully, but staying protected.
So there's a lot to take in there.
Definitely. He concludes by stressing the need to actually study these teachings to understand them properly.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, we've explored Sheikh Nurjan Miramati's perspective on, well, a whole unseen dimension interacting with our lives.
Yeah, through energy, through technology like electronics, how these beings supposedly sustain themselves on our energy, food energy.
And then the countermeasures covering food, specific fragrances, positive practices like zikr and salah, following the sunnah, even simple etiquette like giving salams when entering the home.
It's definitely a unique lens. It gives a different kind of significance to many traditional Islamic practices, framing them in terms of energy and unseen realities.
It really offers you, the listener, a different way to think about your daily routines, your home environment, even your own inner state.
A very specific spiritual cosmology to consider.
So the question to ponder might be, how could understanding these concepts, as Sheikh Nurjan Miramati presents them, possibly influence your approach to your own daily life or spiritual path? Or perhaps, what other ways might these phenomena he describes be interpreted?
Lots to think about.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the teachings of Sheikh Nurjan Miramati.